Some truths are not written but remembered in the marrow of voidfarers who never lived to tell them. The region known to chartists as the Slinar Drift bears such memory. Vessels that passed through its cold domain spoke of lost Auspex echoes, of phantom signals repeating words no human tongue had formed. Entire convoys deviated there, some never reappearing. For the Imperium, this became no more than one stain among countless thousands in its stellar dominion, a place where a candle flame guttered, then died, and was noted only as a tally in administratum ledgers of attrition. The Damnatio Magellus was one such flame. A grand vessel of rogue trader Lucawa's flotilla, bearing heraldry faded with centuries of unlicensed commerce, it vanished in the heart of a warp squall. Its loss was not marked by mourning banners across the segmentum. There were no statues raised, no liturgies preserved. 16 decades of absence scoured it from living memory. The galaxy ground onward, fed by the blood of a million other deaths. And yet, the void is patient, and what it conceals is seldom forgiven. When the Magellus returned, it did so without herald or explanation. The hulk bled out of unreality into the currents of the Slinar Drift, its mass fractured, its structure scored with rents vast enough to house cities. The void itself recoiled from its presence. Astropaths sent to listen heard only broken half-screams, as though the hull were a corpse whose bones remembered violence. Where the Imperium sees derelict, it also sees opportunity, and so expeditions were mounted. Chapters of the Adeptus Astartes and cadres of the Mechanicus came to stand upon its outer skin, reciting the litanies that guard against the warp's taint. Yet before their boots pressed upon the fractured decking, the drift itself bore witness. For centuries it had carried wrecks adrift in eternal procession, the broken carcasses of merchantmen, the shattered remains of Imperial escorts, even the husks of alien craft whose names no longer resound in the galaxy's memory. Each drifted past the Magellus as though compelled to orbit it, forming a procession of rust and ruin in the black. This ballet of dereliction was no random scatter of void flotsam, but a pattern. To some eyes it seemed as if these other dead ships had gathered in attendance, as mourners at a procession whose dirge had no beginning. What does it mean when the graveyard itself moves in deference to a single corpse? Was this a relic of warp tides, a meaningless eddy of gravitation? Or had the void learned a new liturgy, unseen by human senses, and chosen this wreck as its reliquary? These were questions never asked in the open. Yet every mortal who beheld the Magellus within the drift felt the same hush of recognition. Something had been carried home that ought never to have returned. The void remembers, and in its memory, the first tremors of dread are sown. Those who first set foot upon the Damnatio Magellus did so beneath the recitation of every warding verse known to the Adeptus Astartes and the tech priests of Mars. Chaplains intoned the catechism of cleansing as the breach was cut into her battered flanks. Servo skulls hovered in tight formation, swinging censers heavy with oils and smoke until the decking itself seemed to breathe incense. This was not ritual for ritual's sake. It was armor, forged not of ceramite but of faith, for all who walked the hulk knew that steel alone could not guard against what lay within. The outer hull bore wounds vast enough to terrify even hardened veterans. Great rents opened to the void, torn edges bent inward like claws had dragged themselves through the metal. To the Mechanicus adepts, the signatures bore resemblance to tyrannid weaponry. Pressure waves of bioplasmic impact, gouges left by chitinous talons larger than a habspire. Yet every measurement faltered. The scale of the damage exceeded any organism ever catalogued. The Magellus had not been merely attacked, it had been mauled. Once the boarding rites were complete, the first kill teams entered. Their records, preserved within Ordo Xenos vaults, speak of corridors bent at impossible angles, as though the ship had been twisted by unseen hands. Deck plating ran with streaks that could not be named as blood, yet stained in the pattern of arterial spray. The Vox recorded no sounds beyond the scrape of boots and the distant groan of a ship that should have been long dead. But auspexes failed within its depths, readings shifting as though the vessel itself resisted measurement. The expedition advanced through decks where void-born mosses clung to rusting panels, where frozen motes of atmosphere glimmered like dust suspended in prayer chapels. Then they reached chambers that bore no resemblance to ship architecture at all. Bulkheads had melted into contorted shapes. Passageways ended in walls of fused bone-like matter, riddled with pores. The hulk had been remade, though not by any warp entity known to the librarius. It was here that the first evidence of captivity was found. Cages of alloy, not of Imperial forging, holding remnants that defied anatomy. Some suggested alien zoos, experiments held within the hulk long after its disappearance. Yet the forms inside were incomplete, as though they had been dissected by the very walls. Fragments of limbs, the impression of eyes across surfaces where no head remained. And within one cage, the remnants that would be sealed, transported, and classified under a number that still evokes dread. Subject number 696. No proclamation accompanied its discovery, no celebratory hymn. Instead, a silence fell upon every helm feed, a stillness more potent than any vow of secrecy. When it was born out of the hulk, sealed in adamantine and warded with every sigil known, none among the Astartes or Mechanicus spoke of it as trophy or relic. It was burden, and all felt it. The Magellus had returned carrying a prisoner, yet whether the vessel had contained it, or whether the creature had claimed the vessel for its own, this remained unspoken. From that moment, the Damnatio Magellus ceased to be merely a lost ship. It became a shrine to fear unnamed. Inquisitorial seal was placed upon its decks, its wreckage left adrift in guarded orbit, never to be broken again. What mattered was not the vessel's return, but what it had carried back across centuries. The Imperium had gained a specimen. The galaxy had gained a question. And the question bore a number, 696. No record survives of subject number 696's true form that has not been redacted by inquisitorial seal or reduced to fragments of corrupted picked capture. What little remains is enough to haunt the mind. Witnesses disagree on its scale, some insisting it was no larger than a man, others that it spanned the height of a dreadnought. Autopsy logs mention limbs that appeared only when viewed from certain angles, organs that dissolved into unfamiliar matter upon exposure to air, and eyes that could not be counted because they rearranged themselves across its flesh. To describe it was to lose certainty in the language itself. When the savants of the Mechanicus sought to dissect it, their tools faltered. Blades dulled, scanners returned patterns that shifted with each attempt. The priests of Mars recorded contradictions, organs without function, tissues that imitated multiple species, skeletal traces that rearranged as though they remembered different shapes. At times, the remains gave the impression of tyrannid bioforms, at others of ancient Necron alloys, at others still of crude primal flesh. It was as if the subject bore memories of many forms, yet belonged to none. Worse than the dissections were the effects upon those who studied it. Of the servitors first assigned, half tore themselves apart within days. The remainder became inert, their machine spirits refusing to awaken. Human observers fared little better. Inquisitorial interrogations describe scholars who gouge symbols into their own skin, who beg to be bound lest they become what they beheld. Psychana oversight recorded no direct warp resonance, yet every sanctioned psyker exposed to the specimen suffered convulsions and blindness, and some never regained speech. The Ordo Xenos debated its classification. One faction declared it a strain of tyrannid never before encountered, a rogue spore of the great devourer cast adrift. Another insisted it bore echoes of Necron artifice, a mimicry of flesh wrought by ancient technologies. A third faction argued it was something older, an inheritance from a time before warp and matter were divided, a reminder that humanity has not plumbed even the surface of its enemies. No consensus was reached. The record of debate itself was sealed. Theological ramifications festered in darker corners. Ecclesiarchal observers saw in the subject a heresy of form, proof that creation itself could be remade, fractured, desecrated. Some whispered that it was punishment sent from beyond the Emperor's sight, a relic of sins committed in forgotten ages. The most dangerous conjecture, preserved only in forbidden glosses, suggested it was not intruder, but emissary, an envoy from a region of existence where the categories of demon, Xenos, and machine dissolve into one. What became of subject number 696 is recorded only in cold ritual, triple-sealed containment vaults, exorcistic hymns performed without pause, and orbital quarantines that have endured centuries. The Inquisition decreed eternal confinement. No attempt at weaponization has ever been sanctioned openly. Yet rumors persist of fragments preserved in disparate vaults, carried from place to place under warded reliquaries, studied in hidden conclaves that deny one another's existence. If true, then 696 has been scattered as seeds into the very soil of the Imperium. And so the story ends, not in revelation, but in dread without resolution. The Damnatio Magellus drifts still, a hollowed corpse circled by lesser wrecks as though attending its vigil. Subject number 696 remains sealed, waiting in stasis, or perhaps dreaming. What it was, what it is, or what it will become, these questions remain unanswered, as though the galaxy itself cannot decide. One truth alone is certain: the Imperium has caged something for which it has no name. And when the Imperium cannot name a thing, it cannot kill it. It can only wait and pray and fear the moment when the cage fails.